Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Business and Beyond's Feature Friday. I am really excited about our guest today, Heather Royer. She is a designer with many years' experience, has had her own business for about 11 years now, and has successfully led the design and execution of fashion and home categories from concept through finished product. She is focused on big box retailers and supporting factories that work with those retailers. Her multifaceted background includes identifying and remediating issues, developing continuous process improvement, and implementing initiatives that increased efficiencies, restructured operations, and reduced costs. And so now you see why I'm excited to have her. Thank you, Heather, for being here.
Sure. Tanya, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, let's start. As you know, we're here to help other business owners. Can you tell me or give me like a little bit of overview of what your business does and why you got into it?
Sure. So my business bridges the gap between overseas factories and big box retailers like Target, Kohl's, Walmart. So I specialize in apparel and home goods. So I provide trend direction, color, design strategies, line plans. So for over a decade, I've worked directly with the factories to develop collections and then present them to retailers like Target, Kohl's, Walmart. So I operate as a freelance and contract designer, and I leverage my experience, such as I've been a VP for a Chinese manufacturer, which resulted in over $120 million of business just at Target in a year. I've
Wow.
also been the VP of design for a toy company doing fashion dolls, like what their hair and their makeup and their clothes look like. Associate design director for an Indian manufacturer, and a past senior designer working at Target for at corporate headquarters as an employee before I had my business. And then a little side note, it's sort of part of my business, but not exactly. I'm also going to be on an episode of a home renovation show soon. So that's exciting. It kind of dovetails into my business, but it was more of like a side opportunity that came up. So the show's already been filmed and all the construction's been completed. So I've just been waiting to hear when it's going to air because it's a new show. So I'm
Oh,
excited about that.
that is so exciting. You're going to have to share the information with us
Yeah,
when it happens so we can share it with our audience and have them watch it. Um,
sure.
I would like to watch that. So, how did you get into and why did you get into the fashion? And I mean, it sounds so glamorous and fun.
Yeah.
So, what made you get into this?
So when I was younger, I lived in like a more rural area, both up north and then in South Florida. And I've I've been into fashion design since I was really young. I was in 4-H, which is like kind of like future farmers, and they taught us how to sew. And I didn't really want to sew any of the patterns, so the ladies in the group taught me how to start making patterns and making my own clothes. So I got into it really young when I through 4-H. And then I also like camping and hiking. One point I even considered being a park ranger. I worked in Alaska for the Park Service. Um, and I tried fashion. So originally I wanted to kind of merge the two. And I went to fashion school at Rhode Island School of Design. I took some classes at Brown. And then my first job out of college was kind of my dream job because it was a kids outdoor clothing company. So it really kind of melded the outdoor and fashion design. And then eventually I started working at Target and really getting into like big box and mass market retailers because I was finding there was a lot of freedom in what you can do from a minimum standpoint because there was never any issues with like how much fabric or buttons or anything because they were so big. It was really exciting to work with like such big companies. So it's kind of how I got into it in a little bit of an unusual way, but a long-standing interest in fashion.
That is awesome. And so you worked with big corporations, you worked
Yeah,
in big corporations, and
yeah,
then 11 years ago, like so many people in corporate, you decided, you know what, I'm gonna have my own business. So
Yeah, there was an in between. So I worked at Target and then I went to work for a vendor, and that turned into really finding out more about working with the factories, and then I started my own business. So there was like a little bit of a in between between corporate.
okay, so you went and worked on both ends of the
Yeah,
spectrum
yeah,
before you opened your own.
yes, exactly.
You know, business ownership is not for the faint of heart. So, what prompted you to leave those jobs and have your own business and open up your own business?
It was kind of twofold. I needed to relocate back to South Florida to be near my family because I needed to help with some elderly relatives. But I also saw how much I was doing and how much I was able to build and leverage my network and kind of solve those business problems without being under that corporate kind of umbrella. So that it was twofold. It was like a need for that flexibility to be in this location, but also that I had been making a lot of money for other people, and I knew what companies needed in this small niche, and I was able to kind of provide those services for them if it was like a freelance or a contract role.
Fantastic. And you've been doing it for 11 years, so it paid off.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
um, and so, okay, as all business owners, we face some obstacles, especially in the early days. Can you
Yeah.
be a couple or one big obstacle that you faced and how you've overcome it, or some hardship, difficulty, something that didn't go quite as planned, um, and how continued the motivation to keep your business going and continue to get to this kind of success?
Yeah. Um, I'm not sure if I'm answering exactly, but like one of the biggest problems I see in the industry as a whole is a lot of the factories offer great quality and pricing and capabilities, but they struggle to understand what big box retailers like Target and Kohl's want. So that's a problem that I had been seeing, um, both when I was at Target, just like working with those factories, but then once I went to the vendor side, how I could prepare correctly for these big boxes. Um, and because of like even now with the tariffs, like increasing costs, the retailers, they want to work directly with the factories for cost efficiency, but they expect those factories to grasp their needs and market trends like an internal designer would almost. And so, like with the US shifting away from China as their primary supplier, new opportunities are emerging in like different areas of the world, like India and Bangladesh. Um, and the retailers are pushing for that expansion, but these new factories don't necessarily know everything of like what they're supposed to like do, because it's almost like a new job for them. um and then some brands also ask for like design working sessions for swatches, techniques, things like that. So a big challenge for me was how do i how do I explain to the factories what I do and what they need to do, and then how do I support them in that way? So I've set up some processes and I've set up different like templates, things like that, that the factories can use when they work with me. So an example of the problem is retailers like Target or Kohl's, they'll provide broad seasonal directions such as color palettes, inspiration images, but they provide like minimal details or minimal to no artwork files. And then factories are expected to create collections that fit those price points, but they don't always know what to provide. So that's been a challenge for me, is verbalizing what they need to do and how I can provide that to them. And it's an ongoing thing. I I try to show it in some LinkedIn postings or just like discovery calls with them. But that's been a big challenge for my business, but also like a really good opportunity that for me and for these other factories, because these factories are getting like big, big clients, big opportunities that's basically being handed to them as these tariffs and other like global and socio-economic changes happen. And so I'm able to kind of step in and help support them in that way. So that's probably been like one of my biggest challenges recently, but it's also where the business comes from.
But so correct me if I'm wrong, but from my understanding is this is where you bridge that gap, right? So
Yeah.
you're bridging the gap of communication between the retailer and the warehouse and trying to get them both to understand each other's needs and how to communicate effectively to get the right products. Is that
Yeah, and helping the factories know what to develop. So they are really good at like certain things. So what I'll do is I'll go through and like look at what they've developed or what they presented before, and then I will help them pick which styles or develop new styles because I've worked with these big box retailers for so many years. I know usually what they're gonna like and what they're not, and then that helps the factory kind of shine because they're obviously are really good, really talented, have a lot of capabilities, or else those retailers would never even approach them. But it helps to have someone kind of in their pocket that knows these different brands, different collections within these big box retailers. What like because each retailer has their own brands that you have to kind of design into within even one retailer. So
so?
that's
And the challenge that you had from a business owner perspective is trying to educate the retailers and warehouses that they need you, that they have a problem,
yeah,
and then educate them on the fact that you are the solution to their problem.
yes. And educate them on my network because I don't do all of the work. I'll subcontract or work with like my partner freelancers for certain things because I can't do all of it. Like there's certain things like a lot of retailers are now asking for like 3D Quo or 3D Max like design. And I know what it's supposed to look like, but I don't do it myself. So then I'll task like somebody that I work with to do it. So if it's like 3D modeling for dolls, it's different than 3D modeling for pillows. And I know different designers that specialize in those. And then the factories or my clients don't have to have that like network that I've grown and like trust and know who's good at what.
So you're leveraging other people's talents, you're leveraging
Yeah.
your network, and you're really most of what you do, it sounds like, is communication. It's communicating with all of these different people in different facets to make sure that you have an end product that really connects with both sides.
And sometimes the communication is visual communication because I'll give a lot of visual direction to both the factory and then if I'm working with another designer or if I'm doing it myself, it's like images or like yesterday I was working on something for some finishes for a hard lines client that does like metal trays and glassware. So I was looking online and looking in the stores of like what finishes are out there, that I know these big box retailers would like and can fit into those price points. So it's like it's communication, but it's also visual communication that gives them guidance and what they need to kind of jumping off point for them.
That's wonderful because I know a lot of businesses have this pain point of not being able to communicate that they're the solution to a problem, not being able to communicate what the problem is to begin with that they solve. Right.
Yeah.
And so you said earlier that you overcame this by creating procedures, by creating templates, by creating certain things that you can provide your clients that will help them through that process, correct?
Right, right. I also work with a job coach too that helps give me guidance. And she's very niche down too. So it's she does job coaching for fashion freelancers. So it's very specific. I've worked with other job coaches in the past that have been really helpful, but this she's very helpful because it's like specific, and we have like group Zoom calls and like a community that supports each other with other freelancers as well that aren't part of my business, but part of my community that I can reach out and share different resources or support each other that way.
Well, you're talking my language because
Yeah.
I am a huge believer in coaching and coaches, and that's how I started coaching businesses. But I always have at least one or two coaches at any given time because they really do kind of help us be more focused, brainstorm, right? Like we're not meant to do things on our own. We're meant to have collaboration. We're meant to have a village, right?
Yeah.
Of people who can help. And I know Harvard had a study that showed people who have someone to hold them accountable, such as a coach or an accountability partner, they raise their chances of success by 95%.
I believe it. I believe it because yesterday I had a call with my coach and it was good. And I knew what my next steps were, but then she followed up with a chat this morning like, hey, how do you feel about that? Can you get that done by next week so I can take a look at it? So now I have like a firm deadline as well for my next steps and what I want to do because I'm always working on my business and I set time aside to build my business, not just work for my business, but like help build it.
Yeah, and that is something that every business owner needs to know. And I'm so glad you brought that up. You cannot just work in your business. You can't just
Yeah.
do the work that's needed, right? You have to work on your business.
Yeah.
And I love that you said that and you're doing, which is probably why you've been successful for 11 years and going strong, right?
Thanks. I think the hardest part though is working on my business when I'm fully booked. That's hard because I'm like, well, I have, I can see the invoices that are going to come in the next month or so. Like I'm good, but then I have to keep working on it because it's like, well, what about the 6 months, the year? Like, how am I going to continue to increase business or, maintain business with like other clients in the pipeline? So I think for myself and probably other business owners, that's the hard part when you're in a good spot and you have those clients and you have that business. It's like pushing for like one more thing in a day or, just trying to squeeze out a little bit more for your future business too.
So planning is
Yeah.
a big part of having a successful business, knowing where you're going,
Yeah.
right? That's one. I mean, you've touched on all of the questions that I had as far
Sure.
as like what are some obstacles, what's working, um, you know, and what have you found are some of the biggest things that have helped you be so successful for so long?
Resiliency. Because with this type of work, there's sometimes that there's not a lot of clients, and sometimes that there's so many clients. And part of that started like when I first started out of college, I got laid off my first job because the company closed. And at the time, I was like devastated. I thought I was never going to work again. Like I was 21, first job out of college. But of course, I found another job in a couple weeks and I was able to even make some more money than I did before. And so each time I've had some sort of setback, it's gotten a little better. So now if there's like less clients or something happens, I'm like, wow, I've done it before. I did it when I was 21. And I did it, multiple times. I've been able to build back like business or finance, whatever is needed. So it's a little bit of going through the hard times and knowing like I've done it before, it'll be fine.
And that is something I think all business owners go through on a consistent basis, right? There's
Yeah.
always some obstacle, there's always something, and resiliency, determination, right? Discipline, those are the
Yeah.
things that get you through those times. And one thing you said is that it's not as bad each time, something else happens.
Yeah.
You think that's because you've dealt with it before, so you don't see it as being such a big deal, or because the obstacles themselves are actually smaller?
I think the obstacles sometimes are bigger. It depends because as I move up in my career, there's like a bigger amount of funds that like I want to make every year. So sometimes it's bigger, but um, I think it's just a bit more confidence in my skills and knowing even if I don't feel that confident today, I've done it before. So I know that I've proven to myself I can build back, adjust, add other clients, pivot, do what I need to do. That it's never the end. It's always either a continuation or something new.
That I love that. I always think about like Walt Disney, and he had to go to over 300 banks that said no to funding him for Disney World before he got a yes. Right. And that's like a great sign of resilience. If one man can get 300 no's and continue to keep going, right, we can continue to keep going. Right. We can.
Well, and also he didn't take their no as his idea was bad, because some people might have been like, "Ooh, I got 300 no's. Maybe I should rethink this. Maybe this isn't like a good thing." But he was just like he kept going and knew his idea was good enough that he went to, the 150th bank, the 175th bank. Just knew that it was not him, it was them.
It's, yeah. And that's the hardest part,
Yeah.
right? Is continuing to believe in yourself, continuing to believe in what you're doing. Um, Even with that adversity, even when you have obstacles in front of you, even when you might lose a couple clients and you have to now start over
Yeah.
trying to build again.
Yeah.
Um, so that is so commendable. Thank you for sharing that. Um,
Sure.
I think a lot of business owners need to hear that and need to understand they're not alone, right? It
Right.
happens to everybody. Um,
Right.
and it can only break you if you give up,
Right. Right.
right? So I have a fun question for you though. If you could have lunch with anybody, living or dead, who would it be and why?
People.
Who?
Could it be two people? Because
It could be two people.
so Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the creators of South Park, so they've been a big inspiration to me. I admire how they write, how they direct, how they do the voice for most of the show. But it's funny. Sometimes it's off color, but what I like is they embrace that like fast, rough, creative process over perfection, and that's something that I've been really paying attention to in my own work is their messy action and not necessarily perfection. Even with like some of the characters, they're just like little circles on a rectangle and they move around, but like that's part of why it's funny. Or even in their Team America movie, how they didn't worry that the puppets, you could see the strings, that became part of it. So I've been really working on and taking like bold steps, even if I'm not 100% ready. Because, like with South Park and their work, it's a good reminder that like speed and creativity matter more than perfection. And sometimes it comes out even better. Like, it's hilarious to see those like little simple shapes and like how their mouths open and just like the ridiculous songs. So I would love to have lunch with them and like find out more about like their creative process and like how did they even think of some of the characters, and how do they create so much product and content so quickly for all those episodes.
Oh, that is wonderful. And I love South Park. And I love that you can relate that to the real world and how to business, right?
Yeah.
Because done is better than perfect.
Mhm.
I personally have a little card that says strive for excellence, not perfection,
Yeah.
because I really do think there's no such thing as perfect, right? There's always room to improve a little bit somewhere.
Yeah.
If you sit there and wait until you think it's perfect, you've already let that opportunity pass you by.
Yeah. It's true. It's hard. It's really hard because I like things to be a certain way, especially as a designer. Like you're always looking at like, is the font right? Is the trim right? And you just have to step, like I just have to step away and be like, it's good. It's good. Like let's get it out. Keep going. We can always adjust it. Even in the morning when I'm going through my list, I was like, I'm just gonna put everything on my list and then I can adjust it as the day goes. So it's been really helpful to try and like follow that South Park kind of motto.
Well, so how can people get a hold of you to work with you? Your contact information? What is the best way to find
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, sure. My LinkedIn profile is probably the best way. Heather Royer. There are other Heather Royers out there. I am not the romance novel Heather Royer, although it was hilarious when I found that. I am Heather Feezer Royer. So if anybody wants to find me that way, they can find me on my LinkedIn profile or my website, Modern Rocks, with a dash in between modern and rocks. So those would be the two best ways. And I'm always open to connecting with other business owners, anyone that is interested in the work that I do, potential clients, anything. I'm always happy to connect.
Thank you. And Heather's information, her LinkedIn profile, website will be in the comments below and at the end of this segment. So don't worry if you missed it. One last question.
Sure.
What advice would you give business owners to help them continue to strive and sustain their business?
Advice I would give business owners. Um, I say continue to pivot. Like look at what your business is doing and how you can be successful. But if it needs to change a little bit, because when I was working through my niche, I thought about going back to like more sweaters or knits, things that I used to do. But then I was like, it didn't feel quite right. So instead of feeling like I had to come up with the answer right now, kind of just get some things down and then pivot as I go. So I think that that would be probably helpful advice.
I love it. So continue to change as the market changes, continue to
Yeah.
find new ways of servicing your clients, of adding value, and that's pivoting, right? And so
Yeah.
um that is wonderful. Thank you so much, Heather, for being here on
Sure.
the show
Yeah.
today.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
And we'll see you all next time.
That's good. Thank you.